the history of Knott's Scary Farm. Thank you so much for hanging out today on a Saturday. And thank you to Underdog Bookstore for having me. This is really cool. Before I dive in, though, I wanted to address a couple questions some folks have asked about. First off, why are we talking about Halloween in the middle of February? Well, for me, Halloween is all year round. As a professional in the Halloween themed entertainment industry, my Octobers are usually too hectic for me to try to schedule anything like this. And really, the rest of the year is kind of just me preparing for October. So right now seemed like a good time to do this. And secondly, why are we in Monrovia for a book about an event that takes place in Buena Park, about 30 miles from here? Well, for the 50th anniversary of Knott's Scary Farm, I did a massive amount of book signings at the awesome Legacy Haunt store and museum that we created. And I've done signings at things like the Midsummer Scream Halloween Convention in Long Beach and Dark Delicacies Bookstore over in Burbank, and different trade shows and conventions nationally. But I have never hosted anything like this in my own backyard. I grew up a couple towns over in Temple City. I lived for quite some time in the foothills of Sierra Madre, and I lived for a really long time right next door in Arcadia. My wife and I, we have spent tons of time here in Monrovia throughout the years. This is where we hang out. And so we thought it might be kind of fun to sort of celebrate and honor our own community by bringing us together for this special event at this awesome place, Underdog Bookstore. So again, thank you, Underdog Bookstore, for having us, and really excited that you're all here. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, because not everybody is, so just to make sure we're on the same page, Knott's Scary Farm is the longest running Halloween themed event at any theme park in the entire world. It debuted in 1973 and has spawned some of the largest, most successful Halloween theme park events on the planet, including Universal Studios Halloween Horror Nights, Six Flags Fright Fest, countless others. Every autumn, Knott's Berry Farm transforms into a special ticket nighttime event that is filled with horror and hundreds of live monsters and live entertainment. It is a recommended PG-13 and up event due to the intense horror elements. It does contain several temporary mazes that are peppered throughout the event, also known as haunted houses. They're made specially for the event. Each maze has its own theme and storyline. Tight, narrow corridors with live monsters popping out and scaring. And then out in the open midways of Knott's, those are turned into scare zones. A lot more live monsters scaring, entertaining people, and every scare zone has its own theme and storyline, but they're pretty intense. For example, Knott's Berry Farm's Old West section named Ghost Town is shrouded in fog, eerie lighting, sound effects, dozens of undead cowboys and Old West townsfolk who have mutated into beasts and monsters, that kind of thing. But there's live entertainment throughout the entire event, and it is a huge celebration. It's a Southern California tradition. People travel globally every year to go to Knott's Scary Farm, so it's a big deal. And I mean, Halloween itself is a big deal. It is second to only Christmas in consumer spending. Halloween is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and well, Knott's has carved a nice slice of that pie for itself. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different, which is a live reading of an excerpt from the book. We released the audiobook last year, and that was a lot of fun, but I've never done a live reading, so you're going to have to kind of bear with me as I battle through that. And then, in preparing for today and kind of choosing which section I wanted to read from, I think a lot of people, when they open up the book, they kind of flip to the pictures they want to see, maybe the decades that they're interested in, and they kind of gloss over the first very important sections of the book. And so I'm going to read from one of those first very important sections of the book, which is the introduction, because it explains why and how this book was made in the first place. And then after that, I'm going to do a little show and tell of some of these ominous looking items here from my personal Scary Farm collection. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And of course, I'm happy to sign any book that you have hopefully purchased through Underdog Bookstore to help support small business here in Monrovia. So without further ado, I'm going to sit over here. I'll shout out so you can hear all the way in the back. And this is the history of Knott's Scary Farm introduction. All right. Let's get to the right page. All right, here we go. Knott's Scary Farm's Halloween haunt is many different things to many different people. If you're a new visitor to the event, Knott's Scary Farm previously included the additional title of Halloween Haunt and was sometimes simply referred to as Haunt for short. But to me, Knott's Scary Farm, as it is now known, is about magic and passion. Yes, it's a world of Halloween filled with gruesome-looking monsters and terrifying, gory imagery. But behind it all, Knott's Scary Farm is fueled by fervor, creativity, and enchantment. I felt a book outlining how Scary Farm grew from a 3-night affair in 1973 to the world's largest and scariest Halloween party simply needed to be done. Why? This event has seriously impacted thousands of people over the years, and it is my intention to describe why and how these people have been so moved by Knott's Scary Farm. Ever since I fell in love with this event in 1987, I wondered how it started and what it was like before I started going. After years of religiously attending, in 2000, my friend Mark Marcoux and I created the first unofficial fan website solely dedicated to Knott's Scary Farm. The website was the first to publish anything remotely close to the history of the event. Unfortunately, Knott's Scary Farm did not maintain substantial archives of their Halloween event. In fact, some records no longer exist. Through the website, I have been blessed to meet some of the people who helped mold its history over the years. I also worked as a producer for the documentary on Knott's Scary Farm, Season of Screams, released in 2004. Between the website and the documentary, I have discovered and properly placed several historical puzzle pieces. A few years earlier, in 2001, I left fandom behind and became, dare I say, an insider. I found a new passion by becoming one of the monsters of Knott's Scary Farm. Dressed every October as an undead werewolf from 1885 named Rage, I became a part of living history. Working inside the event is a far cry from simply visiting each October as a guest to witness firsthand what brings this massive machine to life is something unique and special. It was there in the dark, dingy trenches where I found a renewed love for the event. I discovered that it was not just a handful of people who brought this mystery to life, but one of hundreds upon hundreds of employees working together for the common goal of breathing life into this beast of an event. While I worked as a character alongside these innovators and hardworking creators daily, a large portion of the story you listen to now was formed before I ever stepped foot on the farm. Even working as a sliding werewolf, I'll explain sliding in a little bit, helping with the documentary and publishing historical interviews on my website, I knew some blaring questions were still not answered. What is the history of Scary Farm? How did it grow to be this big? What is the magic that fuels this entity that I have come to know and love? I decided to go on a journey to find the answers to these questions. After conducting 80 interviews, collecting over 5,000 pictures, researching for a combined 10 years, and asking for some much-needed help from Knott's Scary Farm itself, it didn't take long to realize, hey, this isn't all going to fit on the website. It was then I decided that it might be time to take this a little more seriously and become more of a historian of Knott's Scary Farm and compile this information into a book. I have done just about everything I can to research the history of the event. In theory, I could have kept searching for the next 20 years and continued finding great people with great stories and or pictures. But at some point, you have to know when to say when. I have more than I will ever need to write the book on the history of Knott's Scary Farm. Thus, here it is. When the first edition of this book was published in 2012, coinciding with the 40th anniversary of Knott's Scary Farm, something else happened. Though by that time I had left my monstering days behind me, one more curtain was drawn as I began a new life chapter by becoming a writer, producer, and director for some of the most popular large-scale seasonal events and attractions at theme parks in the world. This next stage of my life has allowed me to work in creative capacities for Knott's Scary Farm, where I help conjure some of the magic that I fell in love with all those years ago. A dream, nightmare, has come true, wherein I now help create the screams for the masses. Seeing the event through yet another lens gives me a deeper appreciation and understanding for what goes into the creation of this colossal event. So now, for the past decade, I've been living alongside the history as it was being made and keeping historic puzzle pieces from being lost in time, fiendishly hoarding important tidbits of relevant information along the way, has made creating this updated edition of the book more manageable. Although my perspective of the event has changed through the years, my passion, wonder, and excitement have thankfully not faltered. This book is founded on a love for attending the event mixed with a fierce passion for working it as a monster to now proudly contributing to its overall presentation. I do not believe I could have collected the information contained in this book as a sole outsider, nor could I have assembled the information as a sole insider. This story is created based on my history as a hybrid. So, do you have your ticket? Well, let's make our way in. Can't you hear that howling wind? I can't see beyond the turnstiles, it's too dark, but I can hear the screams already. The fog is making its way out here to the main gate. Ah, the smell of Knott's Scary Farm fog. Isn't it sweet? The anticipation is killing me. What can possibly be in there making people scream? Are you excited? Me too. Well, here we are. Pass through the turnstile. We're about to walk into the darkness of Knott's Scary Farm. Thank you. Thank you. Looking at these different items here on the table, these are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what my actual Scary Farm collection is. And so what I did was picked out an item or two that kind of represents each decade Knott's Scary Farm has been around. So starting with the 1970s, in this little frame right here is an original, unused 1977 Knott's Scary Farm Halloween Haunt ticket. Now, this predates me going to the event. It was gifted to me by the very, very talented artist named Bob Bates, who designed the ticket. Now, Bob was an outside contractor, a commercial artist for Knott's Berry Farm, but he's really a prolific artist for Knott's, creating famous ride and attraction posters and souvenir maps and menus, even designed the main gate marquee for Knott's Berry Farm in the 1970s. A lot of Bob's artwork can be seen at Knott's Berry Farm to this day, toward the front of the park and inside Virginia's gift shop. There's a huge mural depicting one of Bob's souvenir maps and some of his souvenir posters designed by my friend Eric Linksweiler, who's over there in the back, also a Knott's Berry Farm historian. Anyway, but yeah, to this day, Knott's still sells a lot of Bob's artwork and merchandise, including water bottles like this that have a lot of his souvenir posters. But several years ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Bob and We became friends. I interviewed him for that website that I mentioned there in the introduction. And he shared great stories about his times working with Knott's Berry Farm and creating things for Scary Farm, including this Halloween haunt lettering there, that logo. That was like the main brand for the event for decades. Now, unfortunately, Bob passed away in 2009, but I cherish the memories and this wonderful gift that he gave to me. But as a quick side note, Bob's story does not stop there. Several years later, I was at the Midsummer Scream Halloween convention there in Long Beach, and we were finishing a presentation up on the big stage they have there. There's all these people coming up and saying hi and stuff, and an adult woman comes up to me and introduces herself as Julie, Bob Bates's daughter, who I had never met before. So it was amazing to meet her, and we connected and we kept in touch. And sometime, like much later, she revealed to me that she pitched a TV show inspired by her dad. The show, a sitcom, focused on two very different women coming from two totally different worlds, discover that they are half sisters, and their recently deceased father, inspired by Bob, has left each one of them one half of his beloved bar and restaurant. So these sisters, having just met, and again coming from two different worlds, have to learn how to work together and operate this bar. Well, the show got picked up by NBC Universal, and it's named Happy's Place, and it stars Reba McEntire as Bobby, named after Bob. My wife and I went to a live taping of Happy's Place, and we got the Bob Bates tour because all the background, like set pieces, filled with Bob's artwork and photographs. It's just incredible. It's streaming on Peacock if you're interested. But the reason I'm really sharing that story with you is it's incredible to me how his legacy has continued to live on in these different ways. And so that's why that little ticket right there means a whole lot to me. Now, going into the 1980s and back to this thing right here, this is an original 1988 Knott's Scary Farm Halloween Haunt souvenir poster. I mentioned in the introduction that my first year going to the event was 1987, and I was immediately hooked. I was terrified beyond belief. I was so scared of it, but I loved it. I went the following year and saw these souvenir posters for sale, had to get it. Because back then, Knott's didn't have a ton of Scary Farm souvenirs the way they do nowadays. They had like shirts, mugs, buttons, and this rare occasion, these posters. So I had to get it. It's a miracle that it survived my teenage and college years, and finally was wise enough to put it into a frame and kind of preserve what's left of it. But that image, that artwork, and subsequent similar images in that era were like the main symbols, like the main icons for the event. They were on all the merchandise, they were up on billboards and newspaper ads everywhere. In fact, for the 50th anniversary of Scary Farm, we took some of those symbols and we made massive stained glass tributes of them inside the Chilling Chambers maze that we created. And then way back for the 25th anniversary in 1997, Knott's issued some of that artwork on poster boards, but they changed the colors and made them kind of like fluorescent colors for like black light. And we put some of those up in the Legacy store that we created. But this predates all of those by many, many years. I'm sure there's others out there, but you never really see them come up on eBay or anything like that. And it's really the only time I remember them selling posters of these kind of logos during that era. So I think it's pretty darn rare. And I love all of its beautiful bumps and bruises because they are a reminder to me of my early years of discovering this event that has had such a huge impact on me. But that artwork there is certainly representative of the 1980s era of Knott's Scary Farm. Next up, diving into the 1990s, is this original sketchbook from the very, very talented artist Catherine White, who was really a pioneer in designing Scary Farm mazes in the 1990s of Knott's Scary Farm. She created some of the most iconic mazes that the event has ever seen, including one of Scary Farm's most famous mazes in the entire history of the event, named Dominion of the Dead, which is really kind of like a symbol of like the gothic and romantic vampires that were really inspired by things like Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles is really popular at the time, that kind of thing. But the maze is kind of presented like in a monochromatic kind of grayscale, except for the blood red. But it really captured the seductive and terrifying essence of vampires. Now, one of the characters inside the maze was the queen vampire. And to me, the queen vampire is really like one of the first unofficial icons for the event. Super, super popular. Most often portrayed by my dear, dear friend, the late Sandy Graham. But people waited hours in line to go through this maze and see the queen vampire. Now, this special sketchbook is filled with concept art from Dominion of the Dead. I have it opened here to a concept of the queen vampire. But this is a treasure trove because it's filled with concept art for several attractions that Catherine created. And so it's a cherished gift from Catherine and a significant piece of Knott's Scary Farm, a history from the 1990s. Now, going into the early 2000s are these original masks and wardrobe pieces from my former characters at Knott's Scary Farm. This piece here, if you could see it, this is this mask and outfit. That's from a now defunct scare zone named the Swamp, which was over by where Reflection or where Silver Bullet roller coaster is, where Forsaken Lake is nowadays. But my character was an undead scientist named the Doctor, and he was part of a story where he was researching these amphibian carnivorous creatures from the nearby Reflection Lake when there was a lake there. And these creatures were turning people into zombies and beasts. Well, after a couple of years, I transferred over to the Ghost Town Scare Zone, becoming a werewolf named Rage. And ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with werewolves. I love werewolves. And I always wanted to work the Ghost Town Scare Zone because that's the granddaddy of all scare zones. It debuted with the event in 1973. So this is my original Rage mask and some of his wardrobe pieces here. And then after a couple of years of doing that, Knott's Berry Farm customized and created a werewolf prosthetic that they would glue to my face every year. So that was kind of became Rage 2.0. And so here's one of the original prosthetics. And I brought some photographs so that way you can kind of see what these characters look like in full costume. And these right here, these are my sliding gloves. I mentioned that in the introduction that I would talk a little bit about that. So these are used for a scare tactic named sliding that was invented at Knott's Scary Farm in the mid-1980s. Some ghost town monsters discovered that sliding on the ground toward the guests' feet is terrifying. And so in time, specialized knee pads, shoes, and gloves were added to enhance the speed and effectiveness of the scare tactic. Sliding is so popular now that it can be seen at Halloween events worldwide, and they all trace their roots back to that handful of ghost town monsters in the mid-1980s at Knott's Scary Farm. Now, bringing things up a little bit more recently into the late 2010s is this in the front here. Those folks in the back can see it later, or when you can come up later. But it's my original Origins, the Curse of Calico cast t-shirt. I co-created that maze with industry designer John Cook, bringing it to life with the amazingly talented people at Knott's Scary Farm. And the maze debuted in 2019, and it reveals the backstory of the iconic Ghost Town Scare Zone and explains why monsters roam its streets every October. The maze has been well received by the guests, and creating it was an incredible experience, and it's still running at the event to this day. But this shirt is very rare because Knott's Berry Farm doesn't sell anything like this. It's usually the cast and the crew who pool their money together to get these shirts made. But that's why this is so special to me. This is from the debut year of Origins. So it means a lot. And so I'm happy to share that as well as all of these other things with you today. So that's my little show and tell. I'm happy to sign any books, but also before we do that, if there's any questions, I can open things up for any questions anybody might have about the wonderful, scary, terrifying world of Knott's Scary Farm.
You're still working?
I still do, yes. Yes, it's a lot of fun.
We love it.
Oh, great.
That.
Well, I can tell, I'm glad we're all fans of the stuff. Yes, yes. So it's a lot of fun. And
She started going when she was just kind of young, but I was kind of worried, like, oh, she loved it.
every youngster's a little bit different. Sometimes I've seen throughout the years kids in strollers where they're just laughing and having a great time, and then I see full-blown adults who should not even be there. They're like completely losing it. So yeah, so that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Any other questions?
How did you get started doing the Not Scary Farm thing?
What's that?
How did you started doing the Not Scary Farm?
How did I get started into it? Well, really, I just became a fan when I discovered the event in high school, and I'd heard about it, but I didn't know too much about it, and um, of course knew about Knott's Berry Farm, but I hadn't been there for a while, and so we went and we didn't know what we were doing or anything like that. And we stepped in, and it completely rocked me. I had no idea. Like literally, one of these sliders slid at me, and I ran into the general store inside Main Street there in Ghost Town, and was petrified. Like I just was so terrified. So, I mean, I loved it, but it was super stressful. And so, but that ran deep because I've always been a fan of like Halloween and theme parks and stuff like that. But this kind of combined all of it. And so I fell immediately in love and have gone every year since.
It's a lot different from Queen Mary and Miracle Studios.
It is a lot different, yes.
Queen Mary last year, it was really disappointing.
Oh, that's too bad.
It was nothing. We walked around. We didn't have anything.
Yeah,
well, it was the mazes, and you had to walk up 3, 4 flights of stairs to get to some of the mazes. It was disappointing.
Yeah, it's tough. I do a lot of work with Queen Mary as well as, don't worry about it, it's okay. I know it's very hard to work on that ship just because it is so old and it's not built for a Halloween event to have thousands of people going up and down all of these stairs. Elevators never work or anything like that. And so a new company reimagined it last year, and so I worked with them, and they're trying to bring it back. I didn't think Dark Harbor was going to come back at all, just because it didn't survive the pandemic, really. Well, Shacktoberfest came in, and we did that as well, and so that was more of kind of a family-friendly type of thing. And then slowly but surely, they started letting us be able to do a little bit more work on the ship, but you can't replace the natural sets of the interior of the ship. I mean, people pay thousands, millions of dollars to recreate that kind of look for other haunted houses. So I think there's some special things about it, but I agree with you. It's terrible operationally to try to go up and down all those stairs is pretty rough. But and then in Universal Studios, I've worked with them too, and I love what they do, but it's different. It's different than what Knott's Berry Farm is doing. So I love all of them for their own different ways, but Knott's will always have my heart. So thank you. Way in the back, yes. Oh.
I always thought the monsters at Scary Farm were just far above some of the best monsters out there in the scary world. I love the fact that the monsters at Scary Farm bring their talents to the table and utilize those talents. My question is, you must have some amazing, memorable scares as a monster. I want to know your favorite.
Oh my gosh. Well, two things. I want to respond to the fact that I do agree with Eric about the fact that the monsters at Knott's are left to their own discretion as to what constitutes character and what they bring to the table. And so for anytime we're training the monsters or whatever for the different roles, it's like, yeah, here's the overall story, but we encourage you to work within the parameters of that story, so that way you have some sort of ownership to it, and you have your own flavor that you can add to the character. And so I think that's something that's been happening for years and years and years, and at Knott's, and it really has kind of spawned this unique way that these actors, the scare actors, are entertaining the guests. But for me, for my memorable scare, um, okay, I'll tell you. I'll try to make it not too long-winded. So I was wearing this mask early on as my character Rage. I was in Ghost Town, and it was at the beginning of the night, and there were people kind of flooding into Ghost Town, and I locked eye because what happens when you're a monster is you make eye contact with all these people, and so you can find out the ones who don't want to look at you are the ones who are afraid of you. But I locked eyes with kind of there's two middle-aged men, and but one of them I locked eyes with, and I was pretty far, but immediately I could see like he just completely just froze, and he was like, and but then it kind of turned, and he started to like cry. So I immediately saw that this was not a good thing. So I went up to him and I broke character. I'm like, no, 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 don't like. And I took off my sliding glove so he could see my hand. And I'm like, no, 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 don't. We're just playing Halloween. And it turned out he was a special needs person, and I spent a little time with him and said, well, come here. Like, so I walked with him, and it turned out to be his brother that who he was with. And we were going up a place, Market Street, where there's a bunch of monsters in Ghost Town. But there's a lot of guests. And I said, I'm like, what's your name? And his name is Michael. I'll never forget it. And this is a long, long time ago now. But I'm like, look, we're just playing Halloween. Look at all these people who aren't paying attention. Which one do you want me to scare? And so he started picking out people for me to scare, and he started laughing, and he started enjoying it. And so by the time we got just down the end of that street, I kind of gave him some recommendations on, back then, the log ride and the mine ride still had monsters in those attractions. They don't do that anymore, but they were super fun. But they were scary, but they weren't as scary as the mazes are. So I recommended going on the log ride and the mine ride. And if you have fun with those, then you can go through the mazes. And I kind of sent them on their way. Later that night, they tracked me down, and Michael had a wonderful time going through the log ride, mine ride, and all the different mazes. We even got a photo together and stuff. So to me, that was a memorable thing because, yeah, it's kind of it's a fun thing to scare people and make people, really kind of, go out of their mind screaming and all that. But it's also about entertaining people and creating positive, memorable experiences for the guests. And so that was something that is kind of stuck with me, was making somebody who was definitely not going to have a good time if things went a different way. But in turn, he ended up having a great time. And so that is my number one little scare. So thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Ghost. Well, I loved every scare zone that I worked in, but Ghost Town for me is and always will be the best. I never worked the Carnival scare zone, even though I went through it a couple of times as that character from the swamp, because they allowed us to do that at that time. And that was really tough because that's like bright light. There's nowhere to hide or anything like that. And so you'll read in your book on how Knott's ended up landing on clowns, because it wasn't always clowns inside Carnival. It was like Mardi Gras and different kind of experiments until they realized, oh, wait a minute, clowns can be scary in bright light. And so that's how that kind of worked out. But the swamp was great. It was a bunch of it was an amazing team of scare actors, and it's where I kind of have my roots were there. But Ghost Town, that's where I spent the most time, and I absolutely loved it and still love it to this day. So, all right, yes.
Aside from the Queen and rehearsal, what other events have you worked?
Many. Over the past several years, I've worked on over 40 major Halloween events across the country. So um, everything from independent haunts to horror, theatrically driven horror escape rooms to full theme parks. So we did a lot of work with the reimagining the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride. For things here in Southern California, the Hayride, Queen Mary, uh, Horror Nights, Knott's, um, and then pretty much everything else was outside the country or outside the state.
You ever worked at anything in San Diego County?
No. I know there's Hallow Scream that they finally brought over. So the Hallow Scream in Tampa was fantastic. I went there several years ago and loved it, loved it. Uh, you'll read in the book that I talk about the attraction named Trapped that was at Knott's Berry Farm. That was like an upcharge, time ticketed, kind of like a theatrical escape experience type of thing. But Busch Gardens Hallow Scream was the first one to ever do anything like that at a major theme park in Tampa, and we went and did that, and that was really really cool. So, but nothing else other than that. Yeah. So, all right. I've been rambling on for a little bit. I'm happy to sign any of your books. I could pull up a chair here, and we can just kind of. Yes. Here, let me get some pens together, and we can do that. Okay. So.